folks, and welcome to the Centrist Post. I'm Lauren Morris. I'm your host today. We have a very special panel that we're going to do this morning, and our focus today is on Islam. So let's start with Mike Ramirez, and we're going to go around the table. And everyone, please give a brief introduction of who you are, and we'll start with that. Mike Ramirez.
Well, thank you, Lauren. Thank you, everybody, for being here. My name is Mike Ramirez, San Antonio, Texas. Regarding Islam, 911 was my wake-up call. I keep telling that to everybody when I first meet them and engage about any Islamic topics. 911 was my wake-up call. I didn't know about Islam before then, began researching it, studying it, realized that it's not the peaceful religion that everybody claims that it is, even our Western politicians who try to tell us that Islam is a religion of peace and that terrorism and extreme are extremists and not representative of Islam. But that's my story, and I have a lot of research about Islam. But I'll just pass it on to the next one.
Go ahead, Tim.
Um, Very good, thank you. My name is Tim Starr. I was born and raised in the San Francisco Bay Area in the 70s, 80s, and 90s. I am a pretty much self-taught student of history, primarily military history of the Cold War and World War II, but also the War on Terror afterwards. And my studies always had a bit of a special focus on terrorism and guerrilla warfare, but I branch out into all sorts of other areas as well.
Thank you, Tim. Bill.
My name is Bill Gawthrop. I spent 48 years in government service as an intelligence analyst and criminal investigator. My analytic focus is Islam, Islamic law, and Islam as a challenger civilization in the clash of civilizations. My perspective on all of this is we should not be looking at terrorism. Terrorism is an act of defiance with no rules. We should be looking at jihad, which is a religious act of devotion, a legal obligation. It is rule bound. If we focus on terrorism, we are not focusing on jihad. Jihad is the threat. So all of my writings focus on four core texts: the Quran, the biography of Muhammad, the Hadiths, and the juridical texts from the Sunni schools of law. There the rules of jihad are found. These are the texts that are not being looked at. The test for that is to find them in the bibliographies of your counterterrorism texts. You will not find them there. That means that counterterrorism text is not doctrinally sound. That's all.
Thank you. And my perspective comes from my personal experience. I grew up in a small town in Southern California, or in Kern County in California. Prior to the Islamic Revolution, the Iranian Revolution, we had a group of Muslims come to my town. Two of the men moved into my home with my mother and I. They were Iranians. They were establishing the Muslim Brotherhood in California at the time. So I lived with them for approximately 6 months, and things went along okay until they didn't go along okay. And my first experience was with law enforcement was when the FBI came to my house and removed the gentleman from our house and questioned us on some of their activities, including their bad behavior that became quite pronounced in my home. I've also had some experiences later in my adult life that were pretty catastrophic to me physically. And those are a situation that I typically remain quiet about, and I don't talk about. But it led me to my studies with people and my involvement in what we call the counter jihad community, I suppose. And so, what I want to talk about today is a clash of civilizations. I think if this panel does well today and we want to get together some more, we will definitely have plenty to talk about. So I want to start by um, talking about, I think this might be a phrase that you coined, Bill. You can correct me if I'm wrong, but you write in your book about challenger societies and Islam being a challenger society. And you write that, and I'm paraphrasing a little bit, a challenger society convinced of their superiority can reshape the world with boundaries and civilizational lines. As the expansion continues, it is characterized by violence, and this becomes a clash of civilization. That violence is something that is quite pronounced right now, particularly in Britain, I believe. So, could you talk to us about that a little bit? Challenger society and it resulting in the violence as you talk about in your book.
Yes, first, it's not a challenger society. It's a challenger civilization. A civilization can be made up of multiple societies. There are multiple societies in a state. There's a multiple society in a community uh, by virtue of immigration and what have you. The problem is at the strategic level where you have challenger civilizations. And for the folks who would question that theory, I would ask them, have you read Huntington's Foreign Affairs article, The Clash of Civilizations, and his book? Because a lot of the arguments against Huntington are predicated on a absence of a reading of those two texts. Huntington lays out very neatly that the world is composed of several different civilizations, the Orthodox or the Russian civilization, China or the Sinic civilization, the Jewish civilization, the African civilization, the Pan-Hispanic civilization, Western civilization, and then the Islamic civilization. The evidence for the civilizational clash, of course, is in our history. When the Japanese attacked the Orthodox civilization in 1905, the Russo-Japanese War, that was a clash of civilizations. When Napoleon invaded Russia, that was a clash of civilizations. When Hitler invaded Russia, that was a clash of civilizations. When the Japanese attacked America, Australia, and New Zealand, that was a clash of civilizations between Japan and the Western civilization. When Japan went into China, that was Japanese versus Sinic civilization. The Arabs constituting the Islamic civilization have been at war with Israel since its inception, and the world has been at war with Jews since time immemorial. Again, different civilizational clashes. So understanding this concept of civilizations, it's really important to understand why it's of significance in studying Islam. Muhammad is probably the most significant human being in history, spanning the secular and the religious world. He created a religion. He created a culture. He created a body of law. He created a worldview. And then he also created a civilization. We can say that the Islamic civilization started with Muhammad. We cannot say who started the Japanese civilization, the Chinese civilization, the Orthodox civilization, the Judaic civilization. We cannot say who started the Western civilization. So what we have in Muhammad is a credentialed individual whose word holds sway for the last 1,500 years. And it is through his example that we should be studying to understand the mindset of the jihadi. We use mistaken terms. We use the term Islamicist, Islamism, radical Islam, a number of things, and then political Islam. All of those are intellectual foils for avoiding the discussion of the Islam that Muhammad taught his companions. The Islam that Muhammad taught his companions is the problem. We are trying to protect Islam from critical analysis by creating these other terms. So when somebody uses the term Islamicist or radical Islam or Wahhabism, whatever, look them in the eye and ask the question, are you talking about the Islam that Muhammad taught his companions? And if they waffle or vacillate, ask them to distinguish between the Islam they're talking about, radical Islamicist or whatever, and the Islam that Muhammad taught his companions. And then ask them for evidence on where they deviate because they may not be able to articulate the foundation for that misconception.
Right, and therein lies the extreme devotion that we see. So we see a religion, a culture, a civilization that really has not, it's still very much alive and has a chain of custody that may or may not have been broken. Sunni-Shia, Mike, I want to ask you about, the differences in the Sunni and the Shia, but I think what um, Bill just explained, described, it explains to me their extreme devotion to Muhammad and to Islam as a faith. Um, so, Mike, can you so in terms of what's happening in British society right now, while the while the British and the Americans, we can see ourselves as having a open and inclusive view of things. With Islam, it's really a us versus them view. How does that affect the faithful?
Well, quite a bit. It affects them greatly because Islam, like Bill was talking about, it's an indoctrination. These people are brainwashed into believing what everything Muhammad taught. And Muhammad taught everything against non-Muslims was their duty to fight against. So they had to fight against the non-Islamic societies, particularly the Jewish people, the Christians. And right now we see in the European countries and here, starting here in America, we see the anti-Semitism on the rise, even more so as the 1930s. There's a great conflict, like Bill mentioned. It's a civilization challenge. Islam wants to literally take over the world, establish a caliphate, and dominate the world and under Sharia law. And that's their goal. It's not, they're not letting up. We give them too much leeway and we give them too much benefit of the doubt, thinking that, oh, Islam, there's a moderate Islam, they can tone down, they're okay. But every devout Muslim is uh, embroiled in their faith so intense that deep down inside they know they have to do their duty, whether they're active in the military wing, which we would call jihadists, or the terrorists. They call themselves soldiers of Allah, and so that's what they're doing right now. They're fighting to take over not only Western civilization but the entire planet. And so what we see, you talked about the Shia and the Sunni. Those are two split factions of Islam that happened after Muhammad's death. The Shia believe that the right successor of Islam has to be from the bloodline of Muhammad, which would have been from his cousin Ali, one of the caliphs. The Sunni believe they can be, they don't have to be from the bloodline of Muhammad. They can be but just a devout Muslim to the faith, abiding by the Quran and the Hadith teachings of Muhammad, and be political. So it's a combination of, the belief in Islam and being political. Whereas Shia, what we see in Iran is an intense. They've got to be from the bloodline. Their belief with the Shia and especially with Iran is that they want to establish a caliphate, but they want to establish they want to usher in their savior called a Mahdi. Mahdi is their savior. He's a hidden imam right now. And the only way he can come about is if they create global chaos in the world.
Mhm.
And that's the danger of Iran. If they get the nuclear weapon, they have no qualms about unleashing it, not only on Israel, but anywhere that they can to create that chaos and usher in Mahdi, their savior. We can go into that in depth later, but there's a lot to that. While the Sunni, and I'm talking about Saudi Arabia, Saudi Arabia is not our friend, not our ally, really. We try to think that they are, but they're not. Their goal is still global caliphate and taking over the world.
Right. So, Tim, you might be able to answer this one. How does a society like the British or a civilization like the British can help me with those two words go from ruling Muslims in the past to being ruled by Muslims now?
Right. Well, it's certainly a very good question. And I think a lot of people don't realize that, oh, shortly after World War I, when the British Empire reached its peak, the Brits actually ruled more Muslims worldwide than anyone else. They had Egypt, they had Iraq, they had Palestine, Jordan, which was Transjordan back then, and they had India, which is a huge population there. This is before the split between India and Pakistan. And, I remark on this quite frequently that, they went from, ruling uh, this enormous population as well as a whole lot of else, 25% of the land surface area of the globe to, just their home islands only and a few remaining colonies in the Caribbean. And now they have this huge influx of migrants coming in legally or otherwise from the Islamic world as well as elsewhere. And they seem to have been guilt tripped into thinking that, everything they did was wrong. They owe the rest of the world some sort of reparations. Uh, and they just let them get away with all kinds of things. I would say murder, but I don't know if murder so much as some other similar violent crimes. And then the other thing is that the British labor movement figured out that native-born Brits weren't going to vote for them that much anymore, but if they brought in people from the rest of the world, then they would have a nice solid constituency for them politically. And that model has been imitated elsewhere. We're starting to do it here. It's being done elsewhere in Europe. Uh, and anything they do or say to curb the misbehavior of some of those immigrants, they are afraid that they're going to lose their constituency. They're afraid if they crack down on, you know, uh, they call them Asian rape gangs, that, they're going to lose votes. And, they don't really care so much about the white working class voters because the white working class voters aren't going to vote for them anyway.
Yeah, that's really scary. And it's also what we can see happening right now in London and elsewhere is that you can't walk out on the street with a British flag. You can't spread Christianity in the public. You can't pray in public. You can't do as a Christian or as a British citizen, you can't wave your flag and you can't pray as a
There you
Christian.
go.
Um,
My friend's daughter walked around Oxford wearing an Israeli flag as an experiment to see what would happen. And she was harassed and stalked and chased and had to go to the police to stop the Muslim guys who are yelling at her to try and get her to, take off that Israeli flag and basically give it to them so they could destroy it.
Yeah, it's definitely violent over there. And so how far is this going to go? I mean, we're finally starting to see some of the British people come out into the streets in bigger numbers, but the Muslims have the police on their side now. And sometimes they even have the courts on their side as well. And this is widespread. This is Germany and the UK. So how far is this going to go? Are we really going to see the fall of Britain to Islam? What do you think, Bill?
If you're asking me, the answer is probably, and here's why. The defense against a challenger civilization are your values and your institutions and the means to back those up with force. The Second Amendment and the First Amendment set us apart from Europe. The First Amendment and the Second Amendment sets us apart from England. And in Europe and in England, the Islamic tradition has a multi-step response to disputes. Talk to the person, chide the person, assault the person, and then finally the use of deadly force. That multi-step process is codified in Reliance to the Traveler, a Shafi law book. When people are threatened in Europe and in England by Muslim forces, those Muslim forces are doing exactly what they are supposed to do. It's jihad and dawah. Jihad is an obligation, and it's a legal obligation. Muslims are doing exactly what they're supposed to do. They are spreading Islam, sometimes by force. The Western societies and England are capitulating. When you do have those brave individuals who stand up and speak up, they are incarcerated by their own governments for remarkably dumb reasons for telling the truth. In the United States, we have 4 boxes: the ballot box, the jury box, the soap box, and the cartridge box. The soap box and the cartridge box are personal prerogatives for the defending of your life and your values. Those 2 boxes are missing in England and Europe. So the inertia from this challenger civilization is postured to overwhelm those people simply because, as individuals, they don't have the ability to fight back. Now, on top of that, there is a book called Polygamy, A Way Through. And it's a textbook on Islamic marital relations. Now, the word polygamy is an improper word because polygamy allows a woman to have multiple husbands, which is forbidden in Islam. Polygyny is reserved only for the husband having multiple wives. And inside this text is a passage where the writer encourages Muslims to take 4 wives and bear a child every year among the 4 wives. So that's 4 children a year, 4 children a year, 4 children. At the end of 6 or 7 years, that's a lot of children. And the reason for that rationale is to demographically overwhelm the host population. So that factor is at work in Europe, it is at work in England. And when you try to voice against it, your own governments arrest you for hate speech. It's not hate speech to acknowledge when somebody is trying to kill you.
Yeah, they have a lot against them, that's for sure, on a lot of different levels. Mike, can you explain to the audience what the Dar al-Islam is and the Dar al-Harb?
Yes, first I want to make a little comment about Europe and England, especially. Well, there's been some articles about then Prince Charles being cozying up to Islam, now King Charles III
Hmm.
being very cozy with Islam, and now not being a defender of the Christian faith, but being a defender of faiths, multiple faiths. He's open now, he's opening England to the acceptance of Islam being within Europe. And so he's not going to be fighting against that at all to defend the Christian faith. He's going to be open to allowing Islam to continue on. The British people are upset, but again, like Bill said, the government will come against them for saying anything against Islam and calling it, calling them hate mongers. So to answer your question about Dar al-Islam, Dar al-Harb, uh, Muhammad basically put it this way. This world consists of two different divisions, the House of Islam and the House of War. The House of Islam encompasses all believers who follow Muhammad, believe in Allah, who believe that Muhammad was the final messenger and he is the prophet of Allah. And their entire goal and entire destination for survival of their civilization, which encompasses multiple nations within the world who belong to Islam, is to fight against the house of war. We are in the house of war if we're non-Muslims. Any society, any Western society who is non-Muslim is considered the house of war, which is the one that Islam must attack until they become victorious over it. And that's their goal, is to have victory for Islam, victory for Allah. So again, the world is divided into two, the House of Islam and the House of War. If you're in the House of Islam, you're a Muslim. You're devoted to Islam. You go with the flow of whatever Islam teaches you to do, whatever Sharia law tells you to do, and you have to abide by that. If you're in the House of War, you can be an atheist, you can be a Christian, Jewish, Buddhist, Hindu, whatever, but you're still in a war against what they consider against Islam.
Right. And so, Tim, do you see any parallels with what is actually happening in Britain right now? Can you compare it to anything, events or in history that you know of?
Well, yeah, actually, I was going to say that the sort of they call it two-tier policing. They nicknamed Keir Starmer two-tier Keir, where there's one standard of justice for some people and another standard for others, and one of those is much more indulgent than the others. This same kind of thing used to happen in the British Mandate of Palestine between World War I and World War II. It's just that the Jews were the ones who were being disfavored at that time, and the Arabs were being given preferential, favorable treatment. They were the ones being appeased at that time, partly because at the time the British establishment was sympathetic to the Arabs more than the Jews, partly because a lot of the soldiers that they had policing the area were Muslim, either local Arabs or from India in the Indian Army. Uh, and now, the wonderful progress we're seeing in England is that regular, normal, native-born English people are being treated similarly to the Jews back in the Mandate of Palestine. So they're being treated almost as if they are a despised minority, even though they're not yet a minority. But as for demographic conquest, that certainly is a well-known, well-established process that Islam in particular has used for a long time. They're not the only ones, but I think they're the most active at it still today. Russia has actually done similar things elsewhere. They did it in Ukraine back in the 1930s. They did it for a long time, even before the Russian Revolution. They drove out the Circassians from what became Russia, drove them into the Ottoman Empire, killed something like 95% of them, and replaced them with Russian speakers. So it's something that I won't say everybody does it, but it's a well-known method. It's not entirely unique to Islam, but I think these days in practice it's quite predominantly done uh, in the Islamic or the parts of the world targeted by Islam.
Yeah, I think a lot of people have looked the other way when it comes to Russia. Can you explain to us how Russia's hand in putting Yasser Arafat into office?
Yeah, sure. And just to establish relevance there, even though Arafat himself was supposedly secular, he was an Arab. Uh, so he was supposedly from a place called Palestine, which didn't really exist at the time. He was actually born and raised in Egypt. He was picked out by the KGB to head their front organization called the PLO, the Palestine Liberation Organization, which was founded in, I believe, about 1964. And that matters because the Six-Day War hadn't happened yet, so Israel was not yet ruling either Gaza or the West Bank, as it's called. Those were still in the hands of either Egypt or Jordan. And the PLO charter originally was very explicit, saying that it had no territorial goals in Gaza or the West Bank. Just to go back a little bit here on background, Arafat's uncle was Amin al-Husseini, who's the Grand Mufti of Jerusalem, which was the highest ranking Arab official in the British Mandate of Palestine. The Brits created that office specifically so they could give it to Amin al-Husseini. They called him the Mufti because he had that title because he had made the pilgrimage to Mecca. Um, they did that to appease his clan, which is one of the most powerful clans in the area. So that was uh, Arafat's lineage, and he followed in his uncle's footsteps. And basically, in with the PLO, he founded also a number of splinter factions, various terrorist groups. And he spent the next several decades from the 60s until, gosh, early 2000s, attacking Israel in every way he could. Even after they made him the head of the Palestinian Authority in the early 90s on the theory that he would crack down on the other terrorists and that way they could actually have peace. But of course, the crackdown never actually happened. And among other things, he was the first world leader, so to speak, even though he didn't have a state and wasn't elected to anything, to meet with Ayatollah Khomeini after the Iranian Revolution. Um, Khomeini was inspired by the PLO and the Muslim Brotherhood. Muslim Brotherhood's been in the background here a long time, and Khomeini tried to uh, pick up the ball from them, but he gave it more of a religious ideological spin. And after the demise of the Soviet Union, the secularism sort of got abandoned in all this, and they let the religious aspect become dominant.
And both of them, Ayatollah Khomeini and Yasser Arafat, were schooled in Russia where, Tim?
Oh gosh, I'm blanking on the name of the university.
It's
This is the Patrice
Patrice,
Lumumba
Patrice,
University. Yeah,
yeah.
they had this training center there for people from what we used to call the third world that they would bring people in to and train them. And they named it obviously after somebody who had been the head of, was it Congo, Uh, country in Africa, Patrice Lumumba, who was assassinated. So he was a martyr in their eyes.
Hmm.
Yeah, they brought them in and trained them there. Also, Khomeini was supported by other Marxist terrorist groups out of Syria and Lebanon uh, in the 70s, right before the Iranian Revolution. There's been a lot of, factional shifting and, you know, juggling alliances since then. But pretty much since the 90s, Iran has been definitely aligned with Russian foreign policy, with Chinese foreign policy. So I see these all as part of the same overall anti-Western camp.
And of course, there's a lot of, rogue and proxy groups out there now who have spread out. The most prominent recently, because of the Ukraine war, is the Wagner Group, who have a heavy presence in Africa, doing Russia's bidding down there and working with the jihadists down there. And after some of their work has completed in Africa, they have now moved on and are setting up camp in Venezuela. And also, just another side note here, all of the hundreds and hundreds of drones that are being shot into Ukraine on a daily basis, the name of those drones is called Shahid. And that is from Iran, and it is the word for martyr. So these things are symbolic, and they mean something. And also, and this is going to lead into my next question for both Bill and Mike, what Russia has been doing in the last probably 10, 15 years specifically is finance and help the Hijra out of Syria and out of Africa into the greater European Union. And so that is benefiting Russia as well. The ultimate goal is for further destabilization. So, Mike, if you could give everybody kind of a definition of what the Hijra is, can you do that for us?
Basically, it's just migrating to other countries and with the goal of overtaking them eventually, whether it's through just overpopulating, which is going to be a big push for them, but also getting involved politically. And that's what we see also happening here in America. I mean, look at Michigan, look what's happening in Minnesota, look what's happening here in Texas.
Mhm.
Uh, the movement of Islam into other countries is their goal and how they're going to overtake and become a global rule. And so our societies give them too much benefit of the doubt, thinking, oh, they'll be okay or they'll tone down, but they won't. Unfortunately, and I mentioned earlier about King Charles III, being cozy with Islam now. And of course, there's some rumor, not proven, but that he had, as a prince, converted to Islam. And so he's been given over to a lot of Islamic influence. He reads the Quran. He answers his Arabic partners in Arabic, in the Arabic language. Another one is Canada. What we haven't talked about, but our neighbors to the north, the Canadians are experiencing the same problem, not to the extent yet, but same getting there as to what's happening in Europe and especially in England with the overtake of the Islamic movements within Canada. And Justin Trudeau, several years ago, opened borders to a lot of the Ismaili sect of the Islamic groups to come in. There's, again, rumor that he may have converted to Islam. So
I think
it
they would
just,
take the Shahada. I think they would take the Shahada. They make it easy.
yes,
They make
that,
it easy
oh,
for you
yeah,
to do it.
exactly. That's
So
all you got to do. Yeah.
and
Once you recite the Shahada, you're a Muslim.
so, Bill, do you think in a military perspective that when they come, let's say, the people in Texas or the people in the imams in London or the imams in Canada, Do they wait till there's like a certain saturation point and their numbers are a certain point before they, you know, become politically expansive and start, you know, starting with this, we're the victims. We're victims of Islamophobia. They use that. And then simultaneously, they're being aggressive as well. When do they start doing that?
It won't be a matter of a percentage point or a population number. It'll be a function of activity. As Islam asserts itself against its host civilization, that assertion will be between people, two people. You take an American teenage girl, let her walk down the street in attire that is normal in Western culture, and pretty soon she'll start being followed by Muslims who will be harassing her for not being Sharia compliant.
Mm-hmm.
You take an individual that uh, has a Israeli lapel pin, that person becomes subject to public attack. And the response for that for the individual is a Second Amendment, personal protection. So you'll see an increase in activity. Now, before that happens, you'll see a more subtle form of pressure where in mosque activities in the neighborhoods, you'll see an amplification of the speakers for the 5 daily prayers. Local legislation will be changed because of Muslim appointees in government, sponsoring the change, allowing exceptions to the noise abatement rules in the neighborhood to accommodate Islamic activities. Then you'll see 2, 3, 4-man groups from the mosques going out to the various businesses, taking business owners to task for selling pork products and alcohol and encouraging them to not do that. That encouragement is a warning. Remember, Islam says we do not punish until we warn. So giving somebody a warning, if they fail to comply, then they get visited by disruptors who come in and tear up the place. Then you'll see the Islamification in the streets where you'll have public takeovers of sidewalks, intersections for the daily prayers. So any force used to disrupt that process, in other words, any force used to restore order, will be seen as a grievance on the part of the Islamification organization. So you'll see steady pressure being built up at the local level, and these are activity-based, not a function of Western recognition of a certain population level. And as soon as the activity starts to impinge on the John Q. public, then you'll see altercations in the street where people will defend themselves. For example, you'll see street blockages where Muslims will blockade a street and hold the occupants of a car captive. So what does that occupant do when he's there with his wife and children? Does he drive through the blockade, or does he let the demonstrators pound on the car and jeopardize his family? One of the things that we should be doing in Texas, for example, is legislation that authorizes people to break through roadblocks. Because a roadblock is actually pretty easy to initiate, even on a superhighway. You get one person who goes out into the lane and starts waving at the traffic, and the traffic will go over to the next lane. So they take over that one lane. Then they go over to another lane, and pretty soon they've got a line across all 4 lanes. Now, that should be criminalized, but more importantly, there should be a protection in law for a driver who has to use necessary force to escape that blockade. We've all seen the YouTube videos of what rioters will do to the occupants of a car, what they will do to the car and the occupants in a heated situation. And government has two responsibilities: protect its enduring values and institutions, and protect its citizens. And to do both, they have to pass enabling legislation. And that enabling legislation means giving the people the legal support necessary to protect them when they exercise their rights for survival. We talk about the upcoming Civil War, and traditionally we think in terms of, oh my God, what's going to happen when the conservatives fight back? It's not the conservatives that are the problem. The Civil War is already in progress. It's sponsored from the left as an attack on institutions, in this case, ICE, law enforcement, and what have you. But pretty soon that leftist perspective will spill over into the Islamic arena, so that now, instead of protesting at the colleges and universities, you'll see public demonstrations against the public order in the streets to assert the Islamification process. And the legislators in the legislature should get off their duff and pass legislation that allows people to use the necessary force to protect their families, themselves, and escape from a threatening situation. And if that means running over somebody who was stupid enough to get in front of the car, then that's something that person who tried to stop the car bit into. He was the provocation, and the driver is defending himself in the only way he can. He can't back up without running over somebody. He can't go forward without running over somebody. He can't move left or right without running over somebody. So he should not have to be a prisoner to the dictates of a mob. He should be given an escape route, an escape option, and that escape option should be codified in law to protect him from prosecution, both criminally and civilly. So the government needs to look at the population, the citizenry, and say, we're going to protect you legally, and we're going to protect you civilly, so that people can once again walk down the street without fear.
What do you think about the radical imams that you're reading about in Texas, Tim, and the fact that it's really expanding here in Texas, and Ted Cruz has gone kind of silent. He says he is, reintroducing the bill to designate the Muslim Brotherhood a terrorist organization, and here we go, minimizing jihad, I suppose. What are your thoughts about what's
Are
happening
you
in
asking me?
Texas, Tim?
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, Tim,
And
go ahead.
and then y'all can answer. This will probably be the last question for this segment.
Right. Well, I think it's certainly a very serious threat. We know that we've had Islamic organizations here in Texas be criminally prosecuted in the past for actively supporting Islamic organizations engaged in terrorism around the world. The Holy Land Foundation is the one I'm thinking of. Uh, I I'm not convinced that waiting on the federal government to declare the Muslim Brotherhood any a terrorist organization, I think is a good idea, but I think waiting on that seems like a bad idea to me, because getting, enough people in Congress to agree on anything these days is pretty difficult. I would be happier if more actions were taken at the local level, where it would seem like we would have more political will here in Texas to do that. I don't know why it's not being done more. I'm not enough of an expert on Texas politics to comment on that. Perhaps some of the other panelists can, but I certainly think a whole lot more needs to be done about it. And I know it's not just in Texas either. Stuff been happening in upstate New York, in Michigan, in Minnesota, uh, all over the place. So uh, it's a very serious problem. And it's a real problem. We haven't seen as much of it here as elsewhere, but I think we really need to do a whole lot more to deal with it.
What do you think, Bill? How are we going to deal with the
Okay, first of
radical?
all, let's go back to your earlier comment. You made a reference to radical imams. What's the difference between that imam and an imam who is responsible to the instruction he received from Muhammad?
None. Yeah,
Bingo.
you're right.
So
And I think what I meant to say is well, and this would be wrong again too. Imams radicalizing their congregations. Actually, they're just encouraging them to their obligatory jihad.
they're providing the instruction that Muhammad provided to his companions.
Okay.
So how do you respond to that? First of all, there are four things that can be done. The legislators at state level, county level, city level have to understand that Islam is a competitive political force, and that once embedded in an elected position, that elected individual who is a Muslim is actually a jihadist who has a positive duty to expand the influence of Islam at that local level. And he does that three ways: by jihad of the pen, jihad of the tongue, and jihad of wealth. Jihad of the sword is not necessarily needed right now because he's got a 75% solution with nonviolent means. Now, jihad of the pen, tongue, and wealth means that he can use his position to appoint additional people of his political flavor to positions of trust inside the government. And eventually these people become career employees and percolate upwards. So wherever you have a jihadist in the government structure, you will see a coattails effect where others are brought aboard, showing the Islamification from the bottom up. So once you educate the legislators about the threat, then you raise the issue of criminalizing the Muslim Brotherhood and what have you. Now, Tim's comment was this needs to be done, and here's three ways to do it. First, you get the directory of all of the newspapers in your state. You can get those from your state press association, and then you convert that into an email list. And then you start sending backgrounders to the editors or the religion writers or the political writers, giving them background on what's happening. You start a very intensive media campaign against the media using their tip line. The second thing peculiar to Texas is that you have both Democrat and Republican and independents county chairmen. And those people are generally identified on the websites by email address. So that creates two additional email lists for you: conservative, liberal, and a third one possibly middle of the road. And then you've got yet another level below the media and the political organizations in the state at the county level. And you've got organizations, interest organizations, lobby groups. And generally, you can go to the Texas or the state election commission and get a list of all the lobby groups in your state. And those become an email list also. So you have a cadre of 5 or 6 individuals that are generating press releases, position papers, and flooding the state. at the county level, city level, what have you. The thing that you have to exploit is people will change their mind. They will wake up when they receive information. And the technique and the tactic is to get that information out there. Obama said that he has a phone and a pen. Well, we've got a laptop and multiple email addresses.
Mm-hmm.
So what we do is we put those to work. We join organizations whose memberships windows identify membership directories, and those become your email list. So we start an sub rosa campaign at the individual level talking about a civilizational threat, and we give them information. For example, I wrote a book, The Criminal Investigator Intelligence Analyst Handbook of Islam. There's not a marketing strategy for this book. There is a distribution strategy. And the intent is to get that information into the hands of as many people as possible. And once they read that information, they will understand the threat and act. So any action on our part aimed at defending against the civilizational threat has to be predicated on getting information out to the public. And the most important asset you can have as a political activist in the defense of your country is an email list and a working computer.
That's a great plan, and we'll put some information and links in the description of this video for anybody that wants to learn further about that and how to get in contact with Bill in regards to his book. So I have one last question, and Mike, it's going to be directed at you because this is really, really important. We're getting squeezed on this word Islamist and Islamism, and Bill, you described at the front of the video what this means. This word has become quite dominant throughout the news and journalism discourse, and people are using it to define, separate Muslims and show some diversity and whatnot, as other people have explained it to me. Some people think it just really doesn't matter, that it's just another word and it really doesn't matter. Explain to the audience again, Mike, doubling down on what Bill has described, why this word is improper, why it might be dangerous, and why it really is irrelevant. As Brigitte Gabriel said, the peaceful are irrelevant, and language is important. So what is wrong with this word, Islamist and Islamism?
Well, Lauren, first of all, I'm going to have to say that we're in damage control right now because the Islamic movement groups have done an excellent job of public relations and actually deception in the media, pushing that Islamists and also our own Western media have accepted that Islamists or extremists don't represent Islam, the fundamental Islam, Muhammad's Islam, the one that Bill talked about, that Muhammad taught all of his followers to do and abide by. And so by separating Islam, Muhammad's Islam, and saying that there's Islamists don't represent Islam, extremists don't represent really Islam because Islam is a religion of peace. Again, that's a perfect example of public relations deception upon our society. So we've fallen privy to that. People have accepted that. And unfortunately, after 9/11, what did we have Governor or President Bush say to the national audience? Islam is peace. Our 9/11 Commission says that that terrorism does not represent Islam, the great faith, the great world faith. We've been lied to, and we've accepted that lie. I mean, not us, personally here within this group, but the general population has accepted that deception that Islamism or radical Islam or extremist Islam is different than the religion of peace Islam. That's what needs to be conveyed, that there is no such thing as moderate Islam. Even President Erdogan said that. There is no moderate Islam. Islam is Islam. And that's Muhammad's Islam, the one that Bill talked about and emphasized. It's their duty, it's their obligation to impose their force of Islam over the entire world. We go back to the Dar al-Islam, Dar al-Harb. They're not going to be happy until everybody is under the Dar al-Islam, under the House of Islam.
Any final
One other
words?
thing.
Oh, go ahead.
One other thing. Again, going back to the population explosion and how they can overtake societies, they can take us by voting. You know, they have that saying, we can conquer by ballots, not bullets. And then my pet peeve, another one is on the freedom of religion clause. The freedom of religion clause is too vague. Of course, it was established so that this country would not establish one basic overall religion to dominate and say, this is our religion, like Muslims do. All Islamic nations have in their constitutions, Islam is the religion of the state. We don't. We just have freedom of religion. There's not going to be any established religion. However, that freedom of religion allows Muslims to come in and set up shop, practice their religion, do what they're doing here in Texas, doing in Michigan, Minnesota, New York, and pressuring the societies to accept them as a protected religion. And have a colleague who says Islam cannot be protected as a religion and defeated at the same time. That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, it's very scary times, and the scale of it is just incredible. Watching what they've done to Europe and everywhere else. It's frightening because obviously they don't seem to be able to manage their own countries. But yet they have this superior thinking that they need to come and manage us because we're non-Muslims, and so we have to be killed. So, I mean, if
that's their goal.
they were to start managing us, I fear it as to what, it's going to look like. And for me, it just all leads to violence. Any last thoughts before we close out on this session? Any last thoughts, Bill, Tim, anybody? All right.
Nope.
Okay, everybody, thank you for joining us. And this is the Centrist Post. Please like and subscribe, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you, Lauren.
Thank you. Bye-bye.